Tonight at 10, sensational claims from behind the palace walls. Acrimony, arguments and violence detailed in Prince Harry's new memoir. From a physical bust-up with Prince William over Meghan to claims of drug-taking, the book is deeply personal about his relationship with the royal family and his brother.
There has always been this competition between us, weirdly. I think it really plays into, or is played by, the heir spare.
Extracts of the book have been leaked and it's gone on sale by mistake in Spain. Also tonight, confirmation that last year was the UK's hottest ever on record. For the first time, average temperatures were more than 10 degrees Celsius. The Labour leader wants more power for local communities, proposing a take-back control bill if he becomes Prime Minister. A special report on illegal logging in the Philippines making the effects of climate change much worse. And thousands pay a final farewell to former Pope Benedict, buried today at the Vatican.
Also tonight on BBC London, St George's Hospital declares a critical incident and looks to discharge some patients as it deals with unprecedented demand amid growing pressure.
Good evening. Acrimony, arguments, violence and sex are detailed among sensational claims made by Prince Harry in his new memoir. Titled Spare, extracts of the book have been leaked to a number of newspapers and media organisations, and it prematurely went on sale in Spain. What's written is deeply personal about himself and his family. There's an alleged physical altercation with his brother Prince William over Meghan back in 2019. Claims of drug taking, and apparently a request that his father shouldn't marry Camilla. There's been no comment tonight from the royal family or Buckingham Palace. Here's our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell.
It's already been on sale in Spain, the Spanish-language version of Spare, entitled En la Sombra, In the Shadow. The contents of Harry's closely guarded memoir have leaked 5 days ahead of publication. At the same time, here's Harry's defence of the book in his upcoming interview with ITV.
I don't know how staying silent is ever going to make things better.
The book's contents will be uncomfortable for the royal family and particularly for William. The depth of the rift between the brothers, Willie and Harold as they apparently know each other, is laid bare. According to Harry's account, one of the lowest moments occurred in 2019 at Kensington Palace. The brothers evidently confronted each other over Harry's wife, Meghan. William is said to have called her difficult, rude and abrasive. Things escalated. According to the book, he, William, grabbed me by the collar, ripping my necklace, and he knocked me to the floor. I landed on the dog's bowl, which cracked under my back, the pieces cutting into me. I lay there for a moment, dazed, then got to my feet and told him to get out. Later, William returned and apologised. In a trailer for the American ABC network, Harry talks about his relationship with William.
There's a quote in this book where you refer to your brother as your beloved brother and arch nemesis. Strong words. What did you mean by that?
There has always been this competition between us, weirdly. I think it really plays into, or is played by, the heir spare.
Returning to the book, there's a widely reported account of what both brothers thought of their father's wish to marry Camilla Parker Bowles. According to the book, Harry and William asked their father not to marry Camilla, fearing that Camilla would become their wicked stepmother. Private moments with his father are also disclosed. The book says that after the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral in 2021, Charles said to William and Harry, "Please, boys, don't make my final years a misery." Harry, it appears, has no regrets about sharing private family moments. He's challenged in the ITV interview by Tom Bradby.
Wouldn't your brother say to you, "Harry, how could you do this to me? After everything we went through," wouldn't that be what he would say?
He'd probably say all sorts of different things.
Some people will say, you have railed against invasions of your privacy all your life. But the accusation will be, here are you invading the privacy of your most nearest and dearest without permission. That'll be the accusation.
That would be the accusation from the people that don't understand or don't want to believe that my family have been briefing the press.
Many other details in the book are being reported across the media, including the assertion that he killed 25 Taliban fighters during his army service in Afghanistan, that he took the drug cocaine when he was 17, and there are details of his grief over the death of his mother Diana and how he later drove repeatedly through the underpass in Paris where the motor accident occurred to try to understand it. So, what now of Harry's future?
If you're invited to the coronation, will you come?
There's a lot that can happen between now and then. But, you know, the door is always open. The ball is in their court. There's a lot to be discussed, and I really hope that they are willing to sit down and talk about it.
For now, there is no comment from either Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace.
Nick, these are highly personal details in the memoir for a family where privacy is almost sacred. Is there any way back, one wonders, for Prince Harry, his family and his brother?
Well, I guess never say never. This is a family which takes the long view. Things can blow over, however unlikely it may seem at the moment. I think the King would want to try to patch things up. I think it depends essentially on the two brothers themselves. Now, William, for his part, I imagine, would think that this is a betrayal of everything that he and his family stand for. A betrayal, above all, of trust, the parading of all of this in public. Harry, on the other hand, is utterly convinced that he is the principal injured party, that he and his wife were disrespected by the royal establishment and by parts, particularly of the British media. I guess all sides need to accept that things could and should have been done better. Trust needs to be restored. The volume needs to be turned down. No family quarrel, no sibling quarrel can be patched up like this, surely. Which brings us to consider what really lies at the heart of this. And I think the clue lies in the title of the book. It appears to be Harry's unhappiness, his resentment at being the spare, at being the younger brother, at having a smaller room at Balmoral, at having a smaller wedding. And when you consider what he could have achieved with his wife as the younger brother of the future king, it just all seems so very sad.
Yeah, OK. Nick, thank you. Nick Witchell. It's been confirmed that last year was officially the UK's warmest on record. The Met Office says that for the first time, the average annual temperature in 2022 was more than 10 degrees Celsius. That means the 10 warmest years on record in this country have all been in the last 2 decades. Scientists say it's clear proof of dramatic climate change. Well, our climate editor, Justin Rowlatt, is here with more details. Justin.
Thanks, Clive. Well, we all remember the record high temperatures this summer and the wildfires they helped drive. But it wasn't just the summer that was hot. Take a look at this. The black line shows the average UK daily temperature across the year. The red line shows the actual temperature. And as you can see, the spring, the autumn and the winter were all unusually hot too. In fact, every month except December was above average. There's the peak summer temperature and there is the sharp cold snap we experienced just before Christmas. And these high temperatures are part of a clear long-term trend. This graph shows the coldest and hottest years ever recorded in the UK. You can see average temperatures have been rising steadily. Now look how all the hottest years are within the last 2 decades. And you can see this year at the end there exceeds them all with an average of 10.03 degrees Celsius, the first time the UK average annual temperature has ever topped 10 degrees. So why are we seeing these record temperatures? The Met Office says there is no question this is the result of climate change. The record heat last year was made 160 times more likely by climate change, it says. It calculates that without human-induced global warming, you would expect a year this hot once every 500 years. In the current climate, we can expect one every 3 or 4 years. And it isn't just the UK. We'll get the figures for last year's global average temperature next week, but we're expecting it to show that last year was the 4th or 5th hottest year ever recorded worldwide. And this year has already started with a winter heat wave in Europe. Look at the red. It shows how unseasonably warm weather has brought some all-time high temperatures across the continent in the last few days. So what can we expect in the future? Well, we know what's causing this. It is rising greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the UK has managed to cut its greenhouse gas emissions in recent decades, largely by cutting down on the coal used for electricity. But here is the problem. Worldwide emissions continue to rise. This graph shows greenhouse gas emissions in billions of tonnes. Yep, billions of tonnes. And the more carbon dioxide we pump into the atmosphere, the higher global temperatures will go. So unless we dramatically reduce our use of fossil fuels globally, we have to expect more record high temperatures in the years to come. Clive.
OK, Justin, thank you. Justin Rowlatt's our climate editor there. Vladimir Putin has ordered a ceasefire across the front line in Ukraine from noon tomorrow to midnight on Saturday. Now, it's apparently so that Orthodox Christians can mark Christmas Day. Well, our Ukraine correspondent James Waterhouse is in the capital, Kiev. James, what's your reading of what's going on here?
Well, the statement itself, Clive, is quite surprising. It's the first suggestion of a complete ceasefire since the 24th of February. In fact, across the 9 years of this long and grueling war where Russia has exerted its aggression on Ukraine. I don't think there are going to be many people living along the 700-mile-long front line expecting some kind of reprieve for Christmas. Here in Kiev, they are just not buying it. President Zelensky has accused Vladimir Putin of using Christmas as cover, in his words, so he can replenish his troops. There are some cynical views here that it's in fact a trap. So here we are once again at that question. Why is Vladimir Putin announcing this now? Well, the thought is he's trying to ease critics once more back home, but we're not going to have to wait long to see if really the fighting could actually pause at midday tomorrow.
Yeah, OK. James, thank you. James Waterhouse live in Kiev. The government plans to bring in new laws which would require key public services like the railways, ambulance service and fire brigade to maintain a minimum level of service during strikes in England, Scotland and Wales. It would mean that employers could sue unions who fail to comply. But one union has called it an attack on workers who are trying to defend themselves and services like the NHS. Today, rail passengers faced the third day of strike disruption this week, with more to come tomorrow. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has that story.
Pickets and placards have become a familiar sight as a wave of strikes has swept the country. Hospitals, railways, airports and universities, all among the areas affected by industrial unrest. Now the government plans to make some sectors keep a minimum level of service going when they strike in future.
We're saying, look, there has to be a minimum safety level that people can expect even on strike days, particularly in areas like healthcare, making sure that an ambulance can turn up, for example. That's very patchwork at the moment. Other modern European economies all have minimum safety levels, and we've announced that we'll be introducing those.
In Birmingham today, the impact of current strikes by the train drivers' union was obvious, with stations closed and tracks empty as workers took to the picket lines. This is one sector that would be affected by the new laws, which would require compulsory basic service levels in any future strikes in the fire service, ambulance services and on the railways. In other areas, the government wants to reach voluntary agreements on basic service levels with the unions. That'd apply to wider health services, education, nuclear decommissioning, wider transport services and border security. The plans have been condemned by union leaders.
These proposals make it unlawful for people to take industrial action. If a worker votes to take strike action working in our public services, this could mean that they're forced to work. It undermines their fundamental right to strike. So we think the government should think again.
The government's been promising these measures for some time. It believes there's support for the idea of minimising disruption caused by strikes. But they will take time to put in place. They'll face opposition. So rather than do anything to resolve the current disputes, they could inflame tensions with the unions. And there's now a clear dividing line with Labour, who say they don't support this approach.
I do not think that legislation is the way that you bring an end to industrial disputes. You have to get in the room and compromise. You can't legislate your way out of 13 years of failure.
Back in Birmingham, the extent of the strikes has led some to reflect on the government's approach.
Totally agree with it.
You agree with what the government's saying?
Definitely. We can't have a standstill that the country stops. We're in enough trouble as it is.
Everyone should have the right to strike if that's what the trade unions specifically want, and the government should definitely comply with it.
This city centre tailoring shop's been directly affected, quieter on strike days with staff struggling to get in. But Carolina says the focus should be on compromise.
If it comes to supporting it and not supporting it, I'm 50-50 because I understand people that are working for the rail. However, it is quite disturbing for everyone else, really.
With industrial action ongoing, ministers have offered talks on next year's pay deals for some public sector workers. But nothing they've said today is likely to help resolve these current disputes, which could continue for some time. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Birmingham.
The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has set out his vision for government, promising to devolve more power out of Westminster. He says he'll introduce a so-called Take Back Control bill in favour of communities across the country. Sir Keir also says if Labour wins the next election, he'll oversee a decade of national renewal. The government dismissed Labour's plans as vacuous. Here's our political editor, Chris Mason.
So this is how you would have done it.
Politicians who hope to embody the future find it tempting to have a go with the technology of tomorrow. Keir Starmer and the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves were at a high-tech engineering site in East London today. Robots, gizmos, gadgets.
Keir Starmer.
And a Labour leader who backed Remain and wanted a second EU referendum, now claiming a Leave campaign catchphrase as his own.
We will embrace the Take Back Control message, but we'll turn it from a slogan into a solution, from a catchphrase into change. We will spread control out of Westminster, devolve new powers over employment support, transport, energy, climate change.
He wants to reassure Brexit voters he gets it. He wants to reassure Conservative voters last time Labour can now be trusted on the economy, that his plans won't involve lots more money.
None of this should be taken as code for Labour getting its big government chequebook out. Of course investment is required. I can see the damage the Tories have done to our public services as plainly as anyone else. But we won't be able to spend our way out of their mess. It's not as simple as that.
Keir Starmer has a confidence that comes from the prospect of winning now being realistic, but he knows plenty of crucial voters still need convincing about Labour.
We can feel the public looking at us again, and we won't let up. We'll work every day to earn their trust. Thank you very much.
You cloaked yourself today in the language of Brexit, talking about taking back control, and yet you campaigned for Remain, you campaigned for a second referendum. Some people might ask you, who is the real Keir Starmer on this?
Well, whichever way you campaigned, I've always accepted that among the issues in that Brexit vote was a real desire by people to have more control over their own lives.
Seems opportunistic though, doesn't it, that you've gone from one position to a polar opposite one in the blink of an eye?
I've many times said that we all need to listen to that basic case about taking back control. I've said it for many, many years.
Would you pay striking workers more than the government is currently offering?
What I would do with striking workers is to get in the room and talk to them.
But you get in the room and you're on one side of the table and they're on the other. What do you actually say?
There'll have to be compromise. Any negotiation is a compromise.
Well, so that means paying
on both
more,
sides.
doesn't it?
But it's a compromise. We need to get in the room and do it.
Watching on, the Conservatives.
people will notice that there was nothing in the speech about economic growth from Labour, nothing in the speech about controlling immigration from Labour, and nothing practical about how to deal with these global issues that are affecting us all.
After the Prime Minister's New Year speech yesterday, Keir Starmer's today. Welcome to the new political season.
Yeah, Rishi Sunak speaking yesterday in a big speech. Keir Starmer today, as you say. Two leaders. How do they compare?
Well, they both have the same aim, don't they, Clive? They both want to win the next general election, but the nature of their current roles helps formulate how they are approaching the challenge that they each face. So Rishi Sunak wants to be seen to be doing stuff and quickly as Prime Minister, whereas Keir Starmer is concluding that it's not likely that there'll be a general election this year. So he's being rather judicious in what he says and doesn't say. So he's trying to reassure Brexit voters. He's trying to reassure people that it'd be a good custodian of the economy. But he can't say whether he would spend the same, less or more than the Conservatives. So there's a lack of detail there. But he concludes there's no point offering that detail just yet, given the election could be some way off. And then the intervention today from the government on strikes. Now, they hope that it'll be seen to be pragmatic, that they're not banning strike action, they're instead trying to mitigate the great effects of strikes. But it won't happen quickly, this. It'll hit opposition in the House of Lords, it could hit opposition in the courts too. So it'll be a battle on principles for a while. Labour and Conservatives in very different places on this, rather than on consequences. It could be some time yet before this planned new law actually is a law.
OK, Chris, thank you. Chris Mason there live at Westminster. Tens of thousands of mourners have gathered at the Vatican for the funeral of former Pope Benedict, who died on New Year's Eve. He'd been the first pontiff to retire in 600 years. The service in St. Peter's Square was attended by Roman Catholic clergy and members of European royal families and was conducted by the current Pope, Francis. Our religion editor, Ali Maqbool, has more from the Vatican.
Before the largest church in all Christendom, in front of a crowd of 50,000, he was brought for one final time to spontaneous applause. It was, of course, the last occasion the two popes were together, one presiding over the funeral of the other. During his homily, Pope Francis used biblical references in which he appeared to compare Benedict to Jesus.
We want to do this with the same wisdom, tenderness and devotion that he bestowed on us over the years. Together we want to say, Father, into your hands we commend his spirit.
In the crowd were an estimated 4,000 members of the clergy, and many who admired the Pope Emeritus as a theologian and intellectual. Although, of course, Pope Benedict stepped down long before he died, a lot of the rituals, a lot of the liturgy are those that we've seen over the ages of papal deaths. Unusually, though, at this funeral, prayers are being said for both the previous Pope and the incumbent one. There was a final farewell blessing. Inside the coffin with Pope Benedict, a deed detailing his achievements. It included a line about his role in tackling abuse. That's upset many of his critics. But as the service ended, others chanted that Benedict should immediately be made a saint. Away from public gaze in a crypt, cardinals accompanied him in burial.
Many of the cardinals who were here were a bit on the older side and will have known him intimately. And so there was a kind of final salute, which it was a privilege for me to be part of.
The 265th Pope, over 2,000 years, Benedict XVI, in the resting place he chose for himself. Alim Maqbool, BBC News at the Vatican.
The Philippines is ranked amongst the countries most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and is regularly hit by powerful storms, landslides and flooding. On the nation's largest island, Luzon, one of its natural defences against extreme weather is at risk. The Sierra Madre mountain range was originally covered in forest, helping absorb the heavy rains from typhoons that form in the Pacific. But mining, quarrying and illegal logging have devastated much of the canopy. Our correspondent Laura Bicker has sent us this report on those fighting to protect the remaining forest and some of those who want to exploit it.
Many believe these mist-covered mountains help save lives, that the uneven peaks offer protection from powerful storms. But the vast Sierra Madre is in peril. Mining, quarrying and illegal logging have already stripped away around 90% of the original rainforest. Now, among those living under the remaining canopies, there is conflict between those desperate to make a living and those desperate to preserve life. Mark sold his cow for this chainsaw nearly a decade ago. He and his wife Grace hide from the authorities as they make money from selling wood for houses and construction projects. He knows it's dangerous, but he says they'll catch him when he's dead.
My message for people is not to get angry at us because we do not actually want this. We can only get our money for basic necessities from here. They can afford to be mad because they have other sources of livelihood, but for us, we have none.
They chop and dry the wood and transport it in the dark via the river. A big order can take up to a month, but will earn them around $300.
They said illegal logging is destroying nature. God gave all this to us, so we can use it.
Others have turned their back on illegal logging. Forest Ranger Francisco leads us and his volunteers through dense woodland to show off his latest planting site. He once made a living chopping down these trees until a deadly landslide killed thousands.
Did you feel an element of guilt? Is that why you became a forest ranger?
Yes, I had trauma back then because I saw lifeless children all lined up on the streets while the houses were all destroyed. There weren't any houses left, even ours was gone. When I remember the things we did, I feel helpless.
But this job comes with risks. 270 people have been killed in the last 10 years defending Filipino rainforests.
Once we called out someone to stop cutting trees. They told us that they might kill us. I told them that we weren't there to pick a fight and were just explaining what will happen to all of us if they continue what they do. You won't be the only one affected. It's all of us.
This is why Francisco and others want to save the Sierra Madre. Strong typhoons and floods are becoming more frequent in the Philippines. Experts believe these mountains shield against the strongest winds, and our dense rainforests absorb the worst of the rainfall. Replanting is a long and difficult process. Volunteers walk miles with saplings. But the bigger challenge will be persuading others that this land is a precious resource in the battle against climate change, and that growing new life now may save human lives in the future. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Quezon.
It's been a good night for Manchester City as they cut the gap on Premier League leaders Arsenal to 5 points. They beat Chelsea 1-0 at Stamford Bridge. Here's Laura Scott.
Manchester City are used to being the chased, not the chasers. But 8 points adrift of leaders Arsenal is how they kicked off the new year. Chelsea, meanwhile, down in 10th and ravaged by injury. Their challenges only deepened when they lost Raheem Sterling within 5 minutes.
Time for a look at the weather news now. Darren's here. Hi there.
Hello there, Clive. A super sunset earlier on here in the Borders, but it has been turning very windy overnight in Scotland. The winds whistling through the central lowlands, but the strongest winds through the night will be in northern parts of the country, gusts of 60 or 70 miles an hour. We've got a deep area of low pressure approaching the northwest of Scotland, but let's not discount that weather front there, because that's bringing a band of thicker cloud and this heavy rain, and that'll be accompanied by some pretty lively gusty winds. It does sweep away towards the southeast, and following that we'll see clearer skies away from those showers that continue in those very strong winds in Scotland. By the end of the night, temperatures will be at 6s and 7s. Tomorrow it's a windy start in Scotland. The winds do abate in the morning. We've still got a lot of showers to start with. Those become fewer and we'll see some sunshine. Other parts of the country seeing some sunshine, especially in the morning, but it does cloud over a bit in the afternoon, especially in the west. A little bit of rain coming in to southwest England and South Wales, but the sunshine hangs on for eastern areas. It'll be a mild and breezy day with temperatures 9 to 12 degrees. It stays quite windy actually into the weekend, still very unsettled, dominated by low pressure. We've got some more wet weather at times as well. We've got rain actually pushing eastwards on Friday night into Saturday morning. It's going to hang around for these eastern areas for a while before moving away out to the west. The winds pick up around these coastal areas, bringing in lots of showers. These are going to be quite lively as well. The temperatures still on the mild side, around 8 to 11 degrees. We've got another area of low pressure approaching the northwest of Scotland on Saturday night. Very windy overnight in the northwest of the country here. And around that low pressure, again, we've got these strong and gusty winds. Some sunshine maybe at times, but the showers never too far away. Some of them heavy and thundery. And temperatures on Sunday will be a little bit lower. Clive.
OK, Darren, thank you for that. And that's it. There's more analysis of the day's main stories, of course, on Newsnight with Faisal Islam. Just about to get underway there on BBC Two. But here on BBC One, time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions standing by for the news where you are. Have a very good night.